It's 2 after the hour. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Ian Richardson from Richardson Richardson Consulting, and welcome to the Thursday Process. This is a process-oriented webinar series where we focus on sharing what has worked for entrepreneurs in their business, what has helped them grow and scale and succeed in their business. And today I'm joined by Scott Wright, CEO of ClickArmor. Scott, how you doing?
Hi, Ian. Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for having me.
Hey, glad to have you. Glad to be here. A couple of key items. First off, a disclaimer: presentations in the Thursday process are intended for educational purposes only, and they should not replace independent professional advice or your own personal judgment. Statements of facts and opinions expressed are those of the participants. They don't necessarily represent the opinion or position of employers or certifying bodies. Nothing presented here should be considered legal or financial advice. You may be watching this on demand. If so, please consider the information has not changed or updated since the original presentation. Again, it's the 1st of September on 2022 at 11:30 Eastern in the morning. So if you're watching this on demand, take that into consideration. A couple pieces of housekeeping. There are live polls that happen through this webinar. Please fill them out. That helps us scale and focus the content on what you will find valuable. There is a question and answer function in this through the chat or through the Q&A tab up at the top on the right-hand side. If you want to send a question, go ahead and post that out, and Scott and I will handle that either live throughout, or we do have some time dedicated at the end. Last but not least, there is a handout section where the process that Scott uses at ClickArmor for thought leadership marketing will be available for download. So if you'd like to grab that process and digest it on your own time and utilize it in your own business, you can grab it there. So let's go ahead and handle some introductions. There's two of us here, like I said. My name's Ian Richardson. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Richardson Richardson Consulting. We're a strategic management and account-based marketing agency. Before founding Richardson Richardson, I owned an MSP in the Michigan market, Doberman Technologies, for about 16 years and owned and operated that MSP. And I'm joined today by Scott. Like I mentioned, Scott Wright is the CEO and is it founder as well,
That's
Scott?
it. Founder as
CEO and
well.
founder of ClickArmor. ClickArmor is a SaaS software startup that helps businesses avoid cyber threats like phishing and social engineering by using a unique gamified security awareness training platform. Scott was a cybersecurity coach and consultant for 15 years before founding ClickArmor as a solution-based company. His experience with executives at many organizations in both public and private sectors gives him a wealth of knowledge on how security services are purchased and deployed within a variety of industries. As the industries change, Scott's been adapting to focus on how small and medium-sized businesses can be reached for different types of solutions. And Scott, thanks for taking the time to join us here today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. It's a great time whenever I can chat with people like MSPs and IT service partners. That's awesome.
Hey, we're grateful to have you here, and really happy to have you sharing your knowledge here today. So thank you for joining us. If you want to learn more about Richardson Richardson or ClickArmor, you can go to r&r.consulting or clickarmor.ca. And if you don't take a quick screenshot of this slide, don't worry about it. Happy to rattle those off if you just ask a question in the chat. So what are we going to be talking about today? Today we're talking about thought leadership marketing. And there's a couple of challenges, Scott, that you had recognized over at ClickArmor. You were bumping up a couple of ceilings. And so why don't you give us a little bit of background around what those challenges are, what was going on in your world, and what you decided to, like, what triggered that, man, what must change? So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming in as a startup founder, I'd done consulting for many years before, and a lot of the business I developed was through word of mouth, close relationships with partners, customers, referrals. But when I created ClickArmor as a startup that's a software SaaS offering that's globally available, we really needed to try to reach farther, and it was kind of a learning process, right? Trying to understand how to reach out to people and businesses around the world that I've never been able to reach before. And we had a lot of different kinds of advice on digital marketing, SEO, and various other approaches. And we tried just about everything. And the thing that I've found that works is using the thought leadership angle. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we want to chat about that today.
Okay. So when you were looking around at the space and kind of saying like, okay, we're we're bumping up. We've got some challenges here we need to cover. We're going to think about
Yeah.
pursuing thought leadership. What
Yep.
uh what were some of the choices that you had to balance, right? There's kind of there's platform, there's content, there's
Hmm.
process, etc. So you had a bunch
Yeah.
of choices that you had to go through. Walk us through
Yeah.
how you chose. Like let's start with platform,
Yeah. For
because
sure.
you use LinkedIn plus Zoom to
Yeah,
present.
that's the two primary platforms I
Yeah.
use right now are LinkedIn and Zoom. And I've used Twitter before, I've used Facebook before, obviously, but um, I've tried a number of different approaches for getting my message out there, and it was a combination, as you said, of platform and content, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you have to sort of make sure, obviously, that your customer base is on the platform, and the people, the buyers, and the influencers that you're trying to reach are on the platform that you're on. And so I found, Twitter and LinkedIn were, both used by B2B marketers. And when it comes to trying to be a thought leader with people in, especially in the security space, where they tend to be pretty serious, they, not all, but most of them are. I found that LinkedIn was really a very good place to find those kinds of people. I think 80 to 90% of our customer base has an account on LinkedIn, and so that's something that we had to focus on for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
When it
So
comes to
it's
Twitter, though, just to add, Twitter is a little bit harder to sort of get a foothold on. You can say things, but there's so many people saying a lot of things all at once. LinkedIn only recently started to be used for thought leadership. It was obviously initially for career building and networking and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
as you might have noticed, over the last 6 months to a year, perhaps, you'll start to see more people actually posting useful information, and people start to now go to LinkedIn to get, what's the latest from a particular thought leader.
Yeah. No, that's you absolutely can see that evolution of the platform as it kind of goes through. And a key takeaway that I had there was essentially you analyzed your customer base and you said, hey, these are our customers. This is who we're currently serving. Where's
Yeah.
the network that they're engaging on? Where's the network that we have the most chance of reaching both current customers but also potential new prospects that fit that same
Mhm.
sort of profile? And you dialed in on LinkedIn. So
Yep.
if you're here in the audience and you're looking for those business professionals, LinkedIn's probably a good platform of choice. If you're looking for folks who might be focusing more on a B2C market, or if you're focused more on a B2C market, you might need to look into Twitter or Instagram, Facebook as a secondary or supporting platform.
Hmm.
What made you what were the so webinar platforms, we're right now in Big Marker,
Yep. Yep.
obviously for everyone, but you're using Zoom. There's a ton of them out there. What were some of the, instead
Yeah.
of platform specific, you
Hmm.
chose LinkedIn because that was the network where your clients and prospects were most engaging with. What was kind of some of the considerations that you kept in mind that
Hmm.
helped you select Zoom, or what were, I guess, what are some of the things that people should look out for there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I should say we were using Zoom for our own corporate, business meetings and customer calls and things like that already, paying, I think, $20 a month or something like that.
Hmm.
And, that worked really well for us. We understood how to use the tool very well. It's got features in it that are nice to use. And I had done in the past, like last year, October being Cybersecurity Awareness Month, I actually upgraded to Zoom webinars for the month just so that I could do a couple of extra events that were published, and it makes it really easy to record. So I was really familiar with the Zoom platform myself, and I think many people are just because Zoom is so prevalent everywhere now. But interestingly, I have kind of a fun story. When I first decided to do a series of serious business thought leadership videos, live sessions,
Hmm.
I imagined using LinkedIn Live, what was called LinkedIn Live, because it's built into LinkedIn. And I thought, you know what, you could create an event, you
Yep.
can create it, you can make it live, it'll be recorded, etc. But I decided, yeah, I'll do that. But not everybody that I wanted to reach was on LinkedIn regularly, so they may not
Hmm.
necessarily see the notifications. And so I wanted it to be available both. Inside and outside LinkedIn. And so I tried to do something interesting where I signed up for something, I think it was called StreamYard, where it would take multiple feeds and or one feed and put it to multiple platforms. One of them went to LinkedIn, and another one I went to was Twitter.
Hmm.
But what I found was the LinkedIn part of it really was very brittle and didn't work very well. There
Yeah.
was not a lot of control. In fact, coming up to the event time, I saw no way to practice or to even test what was working. And so I had to sort of set up these temporary events and see if I could get them going. And all of a sudden, someone would type in my LinkedIn chat, "Hey, I see you." Like it wasn't intended for everybody to see this. I was just trying to test the whole facility before I started. So that was the
Hmm.
number one red flag. And it was just like, I don't know how to do this properly. It's just not intuitive. And I Googled for like an hour trying to figure out how to manage and test this LinkedIn Live thing. And so I decided eventually, you know what, I'm just going to do it on Zoom to start with, where I'm comfortable, right? And I know how to set the meetings up with webinars. It's pretty easy. You just set up a web page within Zoom, and it
Hmm.
drives people, it collects people, and we use HubSpot for our client relationship management, and it will automatically import people into the HubSpot database as well. So it's a nice, easy to use, smooth process for me, and I'm sure there are maybe better ones that we'll find eventually. And I just found that, from the point of view of the time I have as a small business owner, to I don't have the time to go out and research a lot of stuff and learn new
Hmm.
concepts. So for me, when I found that I could host the sessions on Zoom webinars, I could advertise them, and I could still create a LinkedIn event, but it wouldn't be hosted on LinkedIn. Basically, when you set up a LinkedIn event, it asks you, is it going to be on LinkedIn or external? And so I say external, and I put the Zoom sign up link in there. And that way, it makes it really easy for people to agree to join or to sign up just by seeing the LinkedIn event. They'll say, yeah, I'd like to go to this. And then LinkedIn sends them reminders that the event is coming.
Yep. And that's
So putting that all together over a couple of different sessions, I've kind of worked out the process that gives me kind of the best results so far.
yeah, giving yourself that space to play, but then recognizing that you can kind of tap some of the tools in your own toolbox.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like two big takeaways on there. The choice to kind of pursue that, and we just ran through this. There's some
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure around platform selection, software, using what you have in there. But you touched on a key part there, which is around initial missteps, around
Yeah.
mistakes that were happened, and I'm a big fan of the adage of, hey, there's never really a failure. There's a lesson. There's
That's
learning,
right. Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
So talk through that. We just
Yeah.
talked about a technical one, but what are some of the other missteps that
Hmm.
that have happened that you've seen, and what were those learnings and takeaways from them?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've learned is, when you start this process, it's good to start it as an informal type of event, right? And like
Mhm.
we're doing now, it's not meant to be, a formal academic process or a presentation. And so the less formal it is, the more you can kind of learn from the mistakes without anybody being kind of turned off by it, right?
Yep.
And say, oh yeah, that happens, and so one of the first things that happened when I did that first LinkedIn live event and I tried to do that streaming, it literally took 5 minutes from the time I said something till it went through all of the different streaming services, and I saw it on a monitor. So I thought it wasn't working. People were typing in chat, yeah, I see you. But I kind of adjust to that and say, sorry about the, you know, confusion or how unorganized it looked, but it was really just the risk of tools not being in sync. And so that's another reason why I went with the Zoom approach itself. But there are other kinds of things that you can predict, you can anticipate a little bit. If you're running, one of the things that I found that worked well is to do this kind of a live panel. And the thing that helps with is, either you may have forgotten to cover some detail, if you were doing a presentation and you miss a part and you go, oh, I've done this. It gives you a chance to think about stuff if you can hand over the conversation for a minute to another panelist and ask their opinion. And at the same time, it gives perspective on this problem. So what we've arrived at is, having 3 or 4 people in a panel at one time will raise a question or a concept and give everybody a chance to chime in on it. And that lets the whole event take on a whole new value. And it certainly was on, there's no shortage of topics, to 45 minutes or an hour. And people tend to stay for the whole thing. It's not like, oh, I see this presentation, I see the outline, I see what, I get what they're doing. I've done that before. So they drop off, right? You just don't
Yep.
see that when you're doing a live panel type discussion.
Yeah, the
So those are some of
interaction
the lessons.
the interaction from the panel almost like it hooks people in, and if you've got that engaging kind of back and forth conversation, like, all right, well, I want to see where this goes. Having done these for a few times, what's your thought, just as a completely little bit of a squirrel here, but what's your thoughts on slide content? I've always found that kind of
Mm-hmm.
keeping the slides a little bit generic, a little bit like, hey, here's some, maybe some bullets or some areas, but are you a
Yeah.
detailed slide person, or are you a keep them basic?
Oh, definitely keep them basic. I think there has to be some. I find having process diagrams helps. Just put a couple of
Mhm.
circles or a triangle or something that gives people a visual of a concept that you're trying to discuss, and a word or two in different places, and then you can start speaking to those things. So you don't need to put a lot of stuff on a slide, and it actually saves a lot of time in preparation. It also gives you flexibility that if you forgot to say something, it's not like it's obvious you just didn't cover that point. Um, but if you think of something additional, maybe a story, it makes it a lot easier to just sort of go around your architecture diagram or concept diagram and speak to those particular issues.
So we I love that. And here, on this webinar series, obviously processes all over everything. There's process. That's all we've been talking about here. And so here we're going to dive into it. And Scott, you really had, when we were talking through this, there's kind of two different processes that you had to manage and run, and they are still being managed and run right now.
Yeah.
There's the concept of, hey, I want to use thought leadership as a marketing tactic, strategy, methodology, and for that to work, I have to have a network.
Yeah.
And then there's the concept of doing the thought leadership itself, creating the content and how you use that content, because it's not just doing the presentation. The presentation is just one small piece
Yeah.
of your thought leadership process. So let's talk about the network first.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us
Yeah.
about what you had to do to, like, I'm starting I want to do thought leadership. I've got a couple hundred connections on LinkedIn. What do I got
Yeah.
to do?
Yeah, and that's something that I had really didn't realize that I needed to focus more on. You know, you say, what do you need to do to build a network on LinkedIn? And there are some specific activities and things you can do on a regular basis that I've learned are very helpful for building your network and building it in a way that is valuable. It's funny because you can there are courses you can take on how to market on LinkedIn, and some of them have great tips, but I've sort of melded a few things together. One is spend time every day looking for the people who are influencers in your space already, who have lots of followers. It's not hard to find someone that has 5, 10, 15,000 followers in an
Mhm.
area that you have an interest in or have opinions on. And so you start following those people and looking at what they post, and you'll see a lot of comments from them on the whatever they're writing about, and you can actually engage with all those people who have made comments. You know, you can see maybe they've liked it or written a comment, and the first thing to do is find the ones that you think could be valuable to you and get connected to them. And
Mhm.
so it's really easy to find 10 or 15 people a day who are commenting or reacting to the thought leaders, and they're the ones that are probably going to be useful to you. Now it doesn't always work out because there's it could be people trying to get into the career side of things, right? Or so you got to kind of watch who those people are and be selective about the people that you're reaching out to connect to. Another thing that I found is really useful in connecting to people. I used to just stew and fret over what to say in a connection request, because you say I want to connect to this person, and it used to
Yep.
be a long time ago you had to know their email address to connect on LinkedIn. Now you don't have to. Their algorithm somehow decides, okay, I'm going to let you connect to this person because you've got enough mutual connections or you've got similar other similarities. But what I've found, and I've heard this from a number of other people, is you get a better connection rate if you do not actually put a note in that connection request. And I think psychologically, it makes sense if you think about it. First of all, if you're putting in a note, you're trying to justify why the person should connect with you,
Yep.
and it's kind of assumed to be a marketing discussion at that point. Whereas if you just make a connection request, somebody will say, "Why did that person request a connection?" And so the
Oh.
first thing they do is go look at your profile. And that's
Uh-huh.
really what you want them to do. And part of the other parts of that process are to make sure your profile and your profile picture are professional and that they are compelling. They have to tell people immediately what you do, what value you can bring them, and that
Yep.
you are a professional. So
Yeah, and
that's the starting point.
that representation of your brand, right? Like, hey, it's the first impression. Are you going to show up to the you
Yeah.
gonna show up to the interview in jeans and a ripped t-shirt? Or are you gonna show up to the interview in a suit and a tie? Like either
Yeah.
one,
Yes.
and not to not and either one is acceptable. It depends on what your audience is, and what your
Yeah.
targeting message, what your targeting strategy is, and what your brand voice is. Um, you had mentioned that when we were talking too, there's kind of a couple of key milestones to share out, and all of
Hmm.
this, again, as a reminder, is available in the process document handouts. Don't worry about frantically scribbling notes, but a couple of key areas. There's that 500 plus connections
Yes.
window, which almost sounds like it seems like that's a guideline of relevancy.
Yeah, for sure. There are different tiers, call them, of
Mhm.
authors or thought leaders on LinkedIn, and yeah, you want to be at least in the 500 plus area for people to kind of recognize that, okay, you may have something I'm interested in in talking
Mhm.
to you about, right? And then you're aiming for 1,000, and then it becomes almost a little bit of your own psychology that can start playing against you. There's a real temptation to become a thought leader in the sense of an influencer. And so
Mhm.
you can spend a lot of time going through those lists of influencers and trying to make connections to people and commenting on things that other people will comment on. and it's fun and it's a bit addictive, but you can't let that take over your life really. And so you want to get to, I found once I hit over 1,000, it was pretty easy to get 20, 30, 40% of the people I requested actually accepting connections,
Mm-hmm.
and that worked. That's pretty good. And so if you concentrate on making 10 or 15 new connections a day, that are valuable and relevant, you can grow that by 1,000 or so every month or two. And so that's one of the key things. The other thing I would tell people is be really careful not to start selling stuff as soon as people connect to you, right? Because especially in the market I'm in security, and I'm sure the MSPs that are on a call will have seen this too. As soon as you reach out to somebody, they kind of have their
Mm-hmm.
shields up. If you're in the security space, they've seen it all before. They've seen people who say they can solve all the security problems. So people are very wary of new connections starting to pitch to them. And so I actually have, we haven't talked really in detail about the content part yet, but I try to publish content once a day on weekdays.
Mm-hmm.
And I use the 80-20 rule, which is give 80% of the time without asking for anything in your posts, and try and give value. And then you have the right to post something that has a call to action. And
Yep.
so after, I usually use a guideline of like 2 weeks, 10 posts. I can reach out to somebody and say, hey, I hope you've seen value from what I've been posting. I'd love your feedback on it. And that's all you need to say. You
Yeah.
could go further and say, would you like to have a chat, or does this resonate with you? And would you like to have a chat?
Yep. Well, and some of those techniques where if you know about what that person cares about, and what you just described, and what you ran through in the process, is almost creating that I always refer to it as the value imbalance. You think
Yes.
about like the relationship, there's a balance of value, that's scale. And so,
Yep.
hey, I what do you care about? And suddenly when you know what that person values, you've got a little bit of an edge. And so you develop content like, oh, well, you
Yeah.
cared about sales. Okay, here's a thing about sales, and here's another thing about sales, and here's a thing about conversion, and here's how to improve discovery, and whatever and whatever and whatever. And so you've been delivering all this value and tipping that scale,
Yep.
which creates one of two things. Either one, they'll talk to you and do an engagement because, well, hey, I see a whole bunch of value from what Scott's saying, and
Mm-hmm.
I want to give I want to have a chat and learn more. That's a
Yep.
great outcome.
Yep.
Or, hey Scott, like I know that you've been doing all these different things. I wanted to introduce you to Bob,
Yeah.
who is in the market for what you're talking about. Like how, here's your guys' information. I'll let you two to connect from here, and they give you a referral, which
Yeah.
is just as good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's in the old Malcolm Gladwell book, The Tipping Point, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
there's the concept of the mavens, the connectors, and the sales guys. So if you could be a connector that brings value to people, then that's awesome, right? So that's, and it really does depend on your goals and your personality, what you're comfortable doing, and you can pretty easily sense whether people are, I've had a couple, and it's not bad that you have maybe 10% of the people that you try to connect to say, I'm not in the market, I'm not, after the first thing you say to them, I'm not interested, right? Well, that's fine. You're going to get some percentage of the people who feel that way. There are a lot of people who feel that LinkedIn should have remained pure and just a networking platform, right? That, is
Mm-hmm.
only used for career development. And it's just, times change. And I think a lot more people now feel there is more value in a platform like LinkedIn than just for networking.
Oh yeah, I've personally, that resonates very, very much with me, since people have started sharing expertise, posting links out to their blogs where they're writing not just a SEO optimized piece of garbage with 300 to 500 words, but like hey, like here's this topic I'm seeing, here's what we're doing, here's
Yeah.
some empirical evidence, what have you, something to create some value.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is way more prevalent in my world. It's a constant tab,
Yep.
and I'm interacting in there in a intentional way versus before, where it's like, whatever. Like LinkedIn, maybe I'll do a post, maybe I won't. I don't really care. It's it's
Yeah.
as useless as Facebook in my world.
Yeah. So we should talk about content now
Yeah,
on
yeah.
LinkedIn,
Yep.
because there are some really important things to know when you're posting content on LinkedIn. Number one is, if you do a post that has no image or link in it to a page that has, one of those image graph links. So basically, LinkedIn will try to find an image that fits in your post, right, that you're linking to. And if it doesn't find an image, you get 5 lines of text that you can put into your post. And if you put it all on in paragraph form, it's kind of hard for people to read if they're scrolling. So the conventional wisdom I've seen, and I think it works, is you do a line space between each, at least in the first 5 lines. So you do one line that's just really
Mhm.
an attention grabber to stop the scroll, right? They talk about, and so
The
you
hook,
want to,
yeah?
yeah,
Like the
get
kind
a
of the
hook in there, leave a space, and then do something that kind of puts a twist on it, or gets people thinking further. And then the last of those 5 lines, you want to give them something that's going to cause them to click the see more button right at the end of the line, right? Because it'll get cut off,
Mhm.
and they have to click see more to see the rest of the thing. So you've got to get enough in those 5 lines that people will click see more and read the rest of your post. If you don't, then you're losing out. Now, if there's actually an image in your post, like if you attach an image or you put a link to a page, you only get 3 lines.
Mhm.
And so you really only have a line, a space, and another line. So you got to do the hook and something to get people to click see more in the first 2 lines of your post. And those are really important things. Beyond that, just make sure it's very readable. Use lots of white space. Bulleted lists in the post early on in the post are good too, because it helps people kind of sort through what you're going to talk about. So those are
Yep.
the key things around content. And what I've found is, I've heard people talk about content reuse, and you put it on your blog, you put it on Medium, you put it on LinkedIn or whatever. The process that I find that works really well is, if I create a post on LinkedIn, it makes for a very short blog post. So I
Mhm.
will take a LinkedIn post, maybe 100 words or so, and then I actually pay, low cost marketing people to take that and make a blog post out of it on my blog. And that will actually be something I can use the first paragraph of as a teaser in a newsletter. And so
Mhm.
it becomes that chain. But I find that using LinkedIn as the anchor point of the whole content reuse actually makes it really easy to spread that content.
I love that. I love that reverse engineering. The the process I follow with LinkedIn and blog is, if I've written an article on a blog, after a couple of weeks, the guideline I've had from the SEO snake oil salesman wizards, it's 50% one way, 50% the other, right? The resonating advice is that you want to give the engines a couple of weeks to crawl and archive and index your post, and you want that SEO bump to your website, not to the social media platform. But then afterwards, you can reuse that content on LinkedIn. You just post and say, "Hey, originally posted here." But I love that idea of taking your post and expanding it out. For those of you watching, and you'll see this in the future, webinars are another great piece of content that you can slice and dice. This is an hour-long webinar,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of different topics which you'll see that happen with these slides that Scott and I are talking around, and we can slice and dice this content into, what, Scott, like
5.
60-second clips, 5-minute clips, etc., that
Yeah.
then inform 20 blog articles and a
Yep.
bunch of little videos and all types of things that can just drip into the social network to, again, expand that thought leadership. Correct?
Yeah, for sure. And when you don't have a lot of resources to spend on marketing or video production and stuff like that, having these recorded panel sessions or discussions are really easy, and people don't need the highest quality production, right? So just try and be smart about the topics and the audience that you're going to actually have for these things. And if you can get it to a point where your database or your CRM is outputting emails once a week that have
Mhm.
2 or 3 links to good articles, then my open rate, I think, over the last couple of months has gone from 15 to over 25% on my marketing emails. And it's just
That's really
because
good.
I've fine tuned, the types of stories people will read.
Well, and that concept around story, just around like kind of finishing up around process, around content. Talk to us about the types of content that you might present as a thought leader. And you mentioned story, which is like
Mm-hmm.
that universal medium that everyone understands. Everyone can get the
Yeah.
concept of hey, like I'm going to tell a story,
Yep.
and then the moral of the story is the lesson of the content. But what are some other
Yeah.
mediums that you found that have been effective when you're pursuing thought leadership?
Yeah. So there are literally, dozens of different ways, and there are people out there who post, sort of brainstorming charts. You can have columns of, a listicle, or all the other kinds of published content that you can have on different perspectives. It could
Mm-hmm.
be the listicle thing where it's just a list of things, and then you write about that as an article, or it could be, as you said, a story, or it could be some other concept that is closely related to what you and your audience care about. And you can start digging into the concept from the point of view of different stakeholders. What does this mean to the end users, or what does it mean to the business owners? And so I've done, talks about executive security awareness, for example. How do
Mm-hmm.
you speak to the business owners about what their team needs to understand about cybersecurity? We know the IT security guys, have everything under control, but they can only do so much. And so the business managers are almost the worst offenders when it comes to security awareness and practices for for how they treat sensitive information and systems, and they shouldn't be exempt and all that stuff. So you can do
Mm-hmm.
articles about different stakeholders' points of view on the concepts that you understand really well.
100%. 100%. So if we're thinking about some of the process heavy hitters around this, and there is a full list on here. I'm going to pull out three big hitters here. But Scott had a 10 step process. There's some when it comes down to that panel, getting folks. You had mentioned adjacent people to the issue that you want to do. So getting people who are adjacent to the topic at hand.
Yep.
You had a prep call,
Yep.
which was a key piece. So kind of doing the preparation work to prepare, and then there's a post mortem. Really, a hey, let's circle around on that. So
Yep.
talk to me about finding people who are adjacent to the topic and getting them to getting them to engage. Dive into that one for us.
Yeah. And so that comes from that initial part of the process I talked to you about, where you're connecting with people that, seem to be interested in the things that your audience are interested in. And so once you find those people and you start posting things, you'll see some of those people drifting over to your posts and commenting or liking them. And the more people who do that, you should be keeping track of who are the most active with your own posts, and then look at what their background is and say, would they provide a different perspective on the content that I want to talk about? And that's basically what I did when I created what's called the Cybersecurity Awareness Forum. I have a guy in Calgary, AJ Lease, who's an incident response consultant, and he does gamification of tabletop exercises and things like that. So he's a really interesting guy. And then, Fleetus posted in North Carolina, worked for a utility, and he was a security operations manager. So he was like in the weeds every day, solving
Mm-hmm.
problems. And
Mm-hmm.
then an MSP, Tyler Sweeney, in I think it's Bakersfield, California, and young guy, really smart though, and has some great opinions. And so we've also, we're looking for more diverse panel discussions too, but we tend to have, the core of us, 3 or 4 of us, who come to every session that we have, and we each have our different specialties in that area. But we really just built it up based on the people who are engaging with the posts that I put out there. And what we do is we create a LinkedIn message group or a chat group so that I can say, you know what, the next week I'd like to do a session on Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which comes up in October. You guys have any questions or ideas or things that would come from your client base or your organization that you'd like to talk about? And then we post that as an event on LinkedIn, as I described earlier, and create the Zoom registration page, just list a few of the questions that we came up with and basically direct people to that. The nice thing is once you've got that going, between Zoom and the CRM, you can get a list of who has been in each one of those webinars, and then you can re-invite them on the LinkedIn event. And so I'm getting pretty efficient at that. There's probably more efficient ways to do it, but getting 20, 30, 40 people on a call is starting to become a regular thing.
And you get that you're able to then use that intent data. So thinking around management of the process, you've got content creation and you've got network size. Some of the big things you had mentioned: profile views, traffic, and figuring out like where was that traffic sourced from. So if you're looking at your website analytics, how many people are coming over or converting from social versus from organic search or direct typing in.
There's a really good part of Zoom webinars where you can add a new link and attribute it to, just give it a title, Twitter, right? Here's a new link for Twitter. You copy that and you use that when you post on Twitter, and everybody who comes in and registers on the Zoom page from that link gets the tag Twitter, right? And so I usually have 5, 6, 7 different links related to an event. And then when I go into the CRM, I can see where they actually came from.
Yeah, those stub sourcing or whatever. If you're not super technically inclined, which I would put myself into that category, that's usually that stuff right at the tail end of the URL. That's almost always marketing tracking sorts of things, and you can really customize them out. We use them for the Thursday process as well.
Yeah.
And then you'd mentioned things around like network size and growth, where you've got connection count, followers, engagements, and engagements are likes, comments, shares, and all three of them are important. One of the managerial things that you and I have talked about is when someone posts on one of your things, you got to engage. So you need to create a reaction to their post.
Yeah.
And then
timing is everything, right? As they say. So in LinkedIn, there is a commonly understood algorithm, I guess, where most people are engaging around 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern time, at least for the Eastern time zone. And so when you post, you want to post near the beginning of that time and monitor it for the next 30 minutes or so and engage with anybody who engages with you. And that drives more visibility of your post in the LinkedIn ecosystem.
Yep. Make sure that you're getting proper engagement as things occur, so that you're kind of posting back and forth and you're almost getting that little bit of live chat. And then content creation, some of the key engagement pieces there are around the numerical count of content, making sure that you've got goals for improvement. But hey, if I'm going to do a blog post a week, I'm going to stick and make sure that I'm doing a blog post a week. If I'm doing a post a day on LinkedIn, make sure that you're doing that post per day, hitting it at the right time, hitting it at the right space, etc. So, and then even for your events, you talked about, okay, look, start small, get 5 people to show up to your event. Sure, get 10 people to show up to the event, and then what are you going to do to go from 10 to 15? And then what are you going to do to go from 15 to 20? What are the actions you're going to take, and monitor and check and ensure that things are going on.
Yeah, and you can try new things, and sometimes things will cause a big increase in signups. You go, what did I do there that that made a difference, right? And that really can be something you can double down on.
Yep. One little small call out I'll do is that I see Matt Lee's bumping around the audience and throwing some things out there. So cool. Good to see you, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
So looking forward, we've touched on some of these, but lessons learned. The blind connection requests have the best impact on LinkedIn. People accept it more than that custom note.
Mhm.
Don't pitch right away. Create that value imbalance, that tipping point for value. Um, but let's talk about polls. Polls are an interesting thing, and we had a really robust topic on here. If you're doing an event, you're
Mhm.
trying to get engagement from your audience. You want people to ask questions. You want people to be engaged. You don't want them to just have it over here and I'm doing email and I'm not really paying attention. And
Yep.
polls are one of the way that that you had mentioned doing that. So talk about
Yeah.
how you use the responses of polls.
Yeah, polls can add a lot of value for the audience, right? If you can do them in real time, then
Mm-hmm.
and you have some thoughtful questions, you don't need necessarily a lot of response or a lot of audience. Just somebody will type in, or within a group of 5 or 10 people, you might have one response that is most common, and that's something that is probably worth discussing, and that a lot of people might have found surprising. I've had polls where I go, I was really surprised by the response on this particular question. I thought that it would be lower or there would be something else that's higher. And so it creates value for people. It creates opportunity for you to do discussion, and it provides data that you can write about later as well.
I love that. All right. So we're almost to that point. Final thoughts, Scott, around LinkedIn network focus, thought leadership focus, etc. What are some kind of final thoughts? And then we want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more specifically about Click Armor and what you guys do.
Yeah, sounds great. So, yeah, the I think the biggest things are, first of all, just get started. As any, content coach will tell you, don't try and make it perfect. Just start doing something. But you really should have a plan for how often, what times of day you're going to post, and make that a priority um, on your calendar so that nothing else intrudes on it. Uh, but you'll find you'll be doing stuff because it does kind of get to be fun when you're engaging with interesting people. You might be doing it at 9 or 10 or 11 at night when maybe it wasn't on your schedule to do that. But and it's fun, and it's certainly going to be productive in terms of building your visibility and your network. But from a business and maybe even a life balance point of view, it may not necessarily be the best thing that you could be doing with that time.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people find it's perfectly enough just to do an hour a day. Do your posting, do your networking initiatives on a regular basis. And for me, it took maybe 2 months, to go from my initial, before I started doing any of this stuff in a really structured way. I might have had 800-900 LinkedIn connections, and within about 2 months, I was up over 2,000. So I doubled the number of LinkedIn connections from 1,000 to 2,000 roughly in a month or two, and I'm sure you could do it faster.
Mm-hmm.
But that
Well,
was, to
you got
me,
some work to do there, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You got to do your actual job instead of just being on social
Well,
all the time.
that's the thing, for MSPs and other small businesses, you do have to, treat this as just a part of your business. It's easy to kind of get discouraged by seeing people with 35, 45,000 connections or followers. One thing I did mean to say, which we didn't really cover, is LinkedIn has a setting where you can change your member type to be an author. I think it's called. I can't remember the
Yeah, the
exact name.
creator, I think. Yeah.
Creators, that's it.
Yep.
Yes. And that gives you some other abilities to do more on a publishing basis, writing articles and things like that. And it will show people your number of your number of followers versus your number of connections. So I actually have more followers than I do connections. And
Mm-hmm.
that when somebody goes to look at your profile, that will be the number that's important to them.
And that'll be the CTA too. So instead of having a connect button as the default action, it'll have a follower
Right.
button. Both Scott and I do use that on LinkedIn, and that kind of grows grows followers. Which there is a connection cap in the LinkedIn platform. There's not a follower cap.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's true.
you can grow your followers till for forever.
But I've never
So
really even hit the connection cap rate. I mean, I think it's like 20 people a day or something like that it will limit you to, or 400 a month, or I don't know what the exact number is. But I've never gotten to that point where I've actually hit the limit, and you can still
mhm,
grow a lot of value in your network on a daily basis without worrying about that.
yep. So Scott, talk to us about Click Armor, and you had mentioned there's kind of a special opportunity for folks who are consuming the Thursday process. Tell us what you guys are doing.
Yeah, for sure. So Click Armor, as a lot of small business MSPs and service providers know, it's hard to get people to take security training, security awareness training, especially. The technical side of security is pretty well understood, and when an MSP has that business, that they're providing to a customer, they can do the technical stuff very easily. They turn it on, and it all works. When it comes to and employee security awareness within your customer base, it becomes much harder to actually be successful because people will look for any excuse not to engage with boring kinds of client compliance training or awareness training. So what ClickArmor does is we gamify the awareness training process in a very interesting way, because it really provides people not only something engaging that is different, but it provides highly interactive experiences for people. And that allows you to actually have higher assurance and more data that people have understood what they're taking. So it's not just a benefit to the customer where the business itself needs to have a compliance. Maybe they have HIPAA or PCI or some other compliance regime that they have to get people trained on. And it's really hard to get everybody through that. So with a gamified approach, we can engage a lot more people and put them all through it. But from an MSP or IT service point of view, it actually helps the service provider, because if the customer gets ransomware, then you're going to be spending your days trying to go fix stuff, and
Hmm.
you're not getting productive work done. So there's certainly a benefit to having all of an MSP's customers employees trained on security awareness. So ClickArmor provides training on phishing, social engineering, working from home, as well as a lot of the other compliance areas that we talked about. And we do it in a tailorable way, which makes it really unique, because it's not just a generic story about a guy, that nobody can relate to, and they want to click through all this stuff. It turns out they can't click through it anyway, because of our interaction, but they will pay more attention. They will be more engaged with this kind of content because it is gamified. There's a leaderboard. People have fun. They try and go beat the boss on the leaderboard, which is always interesting to watch.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to speak with anybody who's interested in gamification. I did a lot of I did security awareness training for 15 years, and I discovered a lot of the problems with why it's such a hard thing to do. And we built ClickArmor to solve most of those problems. And so I just love talking to people about security awareness or about gamification. So anybody who wants to could reach out.
Love that. Love that. And you can go to clickarmor.ca/R&R for a special offer as an MSP for consuming that. And make sure you head over there today. And Scott, one of the we've got a couple of questions here, and we're at
Mhm.
that time in the webinar to run through them. One of them that bubbled up was, how long did it take you to grow your LinkedIn network to where you felt it was viable for thought leadership? And you had mentioned with some focused items over a couple of months, you were able to double it from 1,000 to 2,000. But
Yep.
where did you, what, talk to us about that. How long did it take you until you thought like, hey, it's a worthwhile network for me to be hitting around this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, once I did it for two months, really, I was getting up over 2,000 people, and I had that rhythm going. I was actually at a point where one of my coaches reached out to me and said, "Scott, you're everywhere. Stop it." He says, how much business have you gotten from that? All those connections you've made, right? And going, we talked about that for a while ago. You really need to be spending more time getting the business from those connections that you've got, right? And so that's really one of the things that I sort of advocate. It's more of a process, not a continuous growth thing in terms of growing that network. It's getting it up to a point where you can reach out to anybody in your network and get a meeting, within a few days or a week or two. And it's not really how big can we get. It's how can we get to a sustainable level of opportunity that I can actually work through. There's no point in having thousands of connections if I can't actually get some value from it.
Yeah. Another one. What do you do if things go wrong during your live events? Yeah. So uh, we could probably do a whole second session on the process of how to handle whoops.
Yeah, yeah.
So you you
So
you, you got to pivot, right?
yeah, I mean, it's like I said earlier. If you can start with an informal sort of panel discussion or a chat like this, things can go wrong, and people don't expect it to be perfect. It's when you're charging $1,000 for a session and you got 100 people or 200 people on it, then you
Mhm.
get embarrassed if something doesn't go right. So you want to make sure that's all well practiced and tested, right? But I don't worry too much about things that could go wrong. The most interesting kinds of diversions, let's call them, are you might be in a panel discussion and you might invite an attendee to be a panelist for a while. It's kind of like in Clubhouse where you can bring somebody
Yep.
up to be in the panel. And we've done that a couple of times, and I've never had this experience, but I kind of have this fear in the back of my mind. What if I invite somebody up and they just dominate the conversation for the next 10 minutes, right? Or 20 minutes. So you do have to be a bit of a facilitator. If you've done that kind of work before, you can sort of with some tact break into the conversation and say, well, we want to make sure we're giving value to everybody on the call, so let's move on to another topic, right? So those are the kinds of things I find still a little bit challenging to think about, but it's certainly not going to stop us from continuing on to do this.
Yeah, create that space. A couple of tricks that I have just to prepare for that is I always have all of my shit, like for a webinar like this, you create show notes, especially when you're sitting in my chair, you're master of ceremony,
Yeah.
you're kind of having to click around. So have them in other areas, not just the platform. I keep an iPad by my desk where I could scroll down in case my screen messes up. There's a couple of different microphones, things like that. Make sure that you've got hotspot on your cell phone in case your internet goes down, and you can always
Yes.
re-blast it. So there's a couple of technical little
Yeah.
how-tos you can do to make your world a little bit better there. We got
Yeah.
about 40 seconds left before this ends, and when this does, it will end, everyone. But Scott, what's the one thing, if someone does nothing else, what's the one thing you need to make sure you do after the event for everyone who attended or registered?
Yeah, just start looking at what you can do to post on a regular schedule and connect with the people that are important to your business, and just do that on a regular basis and you will see results.
Hey, so a call to action for everyone, download that process under handouts. You can connect with Scott on LinkedIn. He's very active there. Clickarmor.ca. Shoot me a connection request. I will register it as well. Really appreciate everyone coming here today. Uh, Scott, thank you for taking the time out of your day on Thursday to join us at Thursday Process. And more importantly, thank you for being willing to share what's been working for you.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and the audience. So wish everybody the best, and yeah, happy to connect with anyone.
All right. And if you're interested in learning more about Richardson and Richardson, you can head over to r&r.consulting. If you'd like to pop on the Thursday Process, you have something to share, you can go to r&r.consulting/connect. I'm Ian Richardson, and until next Thursday, take it easy.